years ago, there was a commercial that I first saw that I found extremely humorous. The older I get, I don't think it's so funny anymore. You've seen the commercial. An elderly person is fallen, and they're crying out with a voice, "Help! I've fallen! And I can't get up." I used to think that was the cheesiest commercial. I mean, the acting was horrific. I mean, I guess if you have to have acting in a commercial. But I thought, this is just so lame. And then I realized that, well, maybe I'm not quite there yet, but I can see my parents and Mimi's parents are there. And all of a sudden, one of the conversations at the last family gathering is whether or not we're going to spend the money to get Mom one of these pendants to go around her neck. Now, if you're wearing one, and I'm not being critical, I'm just saying that I am in a transformational stage, going from this is silliness and ridiculous, not the concept of it, but the way it was portrayed. And now I'm beginning to see it for a little bit different type of perspective. I don't know. Maybe it's an age thing. Maybe it's a guy thing. I don't know. I mean, guys are taught to be fiercely pull yourself up by your bootstraps type attitude. Well, maybe there's just some times where I can't. And I need a little bit of assistance. So I begin to wonder. Dora Claver wrote a anti-self-help book. Don't you just love that phrase? Called Mayday, Asking for Help in Times of Need. Now, some of me think that this is nuts too. If you need help, you ask. When the group of us were headed to Knoxville, you get on an airplane, and you got these people that have a 49.9 pound piece of luggage that they don't want to check because it's going to cost them $25. And they're going to try to cram it in the overhead compartment. And if you have flown recently, you know what I'm talking about. And the person can't even get down and pick up the luggage to put it up there. You need some help? No, I can do it myself. Okay. You just get to that point where it's like, if you need help, just take the help. If you need a little bit of assistance, it's okay to ask. Driving along the side of the road and somebody's got a flat tire, you pull over and sit, and they're just sitting there, and they've got the jack out, they've got the spare tire out, and they've got the hubcap off. The lug nuts are still sort of on. And you need some help? Nope, got it handled, everything's fine, and then 15 minutes later, as you're coming back down the highway the other direction, they're still sitting there and they're no farther along than what they were. I'm thinking, wow. Unless people think that you've got to call a firefighter or a paramed or something, I'll figure it out. Sooner or later, I got this thing. I guess, having a father who taught auto mechanics for 40-some years professionally, I realized there's certain things I can't do with a car. Change the tire, yeah. I can fill it up with gas. I can change the oil if I take my time. But I don't want to do the rest of the stuff. I need some help. And I don't mind asking for help. We get to that point where we begin to wonder whether or not we just are too embarrassed, or we're just too stubborn, or too prideful to even ask for help. The book goes on and talks about some of the reasons why we don't ask for help. I mean, for most of us, our parents and grandparents were part of that generation that, I don't know if they came up with the phrase, pull yourself up by your bootstraps, but they're the ones who lived it. They're the ones I saw do it. And I'm thinking, man, I don't want to disappoint them. They're going to think, oh, well, there's a part of the family tree that didn't quite branch the way we were hoping. So we've got those role models, and we want to prove to ourselves, prove to them, even though they may not even be alive, prove to them that, yeah, I can do this. I can take that hard work and I can get something accomplished. I don't know what it is, though. Maybe it's that independent streak that we have in us. Maybe it's something to do with that. I don't know. But the idea, we want to do it by ourselves. We don't want assistance. All you have to do is be around little kids to understand that line. Need some help, though. Are you sure? I can do it myself. And just that phrase, it's like, oh my goodness, I don't ask anymore. I'm sorry. But maybe part of it is that we don't even think about asking. Maybe we've got this mindset that we have to be so self-sufficient that we're embarrassed to even ask for help. We're so focused on trying to care for ourselves that we don't even realize when we need help. And you know the phrase, if you want something done right, do it yourself. Well, I don't want to do it wrong. But most of the time when I try to do something out of my comfort zone, I'm going to do it wrong. I need to realize there are some things that just aren't me. And I need some assistance. But I don't want to be indebted to anybody. I don't want somebody to come back to me and say, do you remember back in 1987 I helped you? Are you serious? You really think somebody's going to remember? I don't think somebody would remember. Do you remember back on the 7th of the month? Yeah, they're not going to remember. But what difference if they do? We just need to realize that it's not a sin to be indebted to somebody. I mean, my goodness, we might have to reciprocate one day. And we don't have to do that. And it could be that we're just afraid. We're just afraid to ask for help. In short, we try to do it ourselves. we achieve modest results instead of getting help and making real progress. We miss out on receiving some help, getting something done right, and allowing somebody else to get, a good feeling, a blessing, if you will, for being able to use the knowledge or the experience that they have to be able to help you. It's not wrong. Well, the character in our gospel story, Bartimaeus, I don't think he had seen the manual of how to respond nowadays. If Bartimaeus was alive and well in Sloan in 2015, he might still be sitting there. He would. Bartimaeus had no qualms in asking for the help that he needed. And he realized that the results that he needed were nothing short of miraculous. Bartimaeus knew that he had to ask for help. He's sitting along the roadside as the crowd followed Jesus and his disciples out of Jericho. And when he heard that Jesus was about to pass by, he could have done a couple things. He could have kept sitting there with his little cup, begging for money. He could have just been quiet. Oh, there's a big crowd. I think I'll just act very pious and just sit here. Or he could have made a darn right fool of himself. And that's what Mark tells us that he did. At the top of his voice, I don't have much at the top of my voice, he cries out, "Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me." People were sitting there like, what is wrong with this guy? Just hush up. Be quiet. Don't you see it's the master? He's got more important things to do than listen to somebody crying from the side of the road. It's the attitude that the people had. One of the texts that reveals this story says the people sternly ordered him to be quiet. Shut up would be the way that we would say that. Sternly ordered. That sounds way too proper. Bartimaeus, just shut up. Will you? Come on. But not only did Bartimaeus keep calling out for help from Jesus, but he raised the volume. Seriously? Everybody's trying to get him to be quiet, and he turns it up a notch. Because he wanted to get Jesus' attention. Why? Because he knew that Jesus could make a difference in his life. He understood that. He knew his need. But he didn't let his need for sight take precedent. He called out for Jesus because he realized that his need for spiritual sight was even more important than his need for physical sight. He shouts at the top of his voice, "Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me." What's the rest of it say? A sinner. You want to talk about the original sinner's prayer? There it was. Bartimaeus knew that it was not his physical blindness, but his spiritual blindness that was the biggest handicap that he happened to have. He didn't just say, have mercy on me, a blind man. He said, have mercy on me, a sinner. Bartimaeus seemed to understand that his vision was not only clouded with cataracts, but by his own need for spiritual healing. He opened himself to the possibility that his healing might be physical, and it might be spiritual. And he was going to call out for Jesus. It could be either or both. Asking for help begins for Bartimaeus when he realized he had a problem, and when he realized that there was a solution right in front of him. For you and for me, that asking for help comes at the same time. We need to realize that, first of all, we've got a problem. I don't know how many of you looked in the mirror this morning and said, I got a problem. But you do, and I do. We all have issues in our lives that we need to have addressed. And realizing you got a problem is the first step in getting the problem solved. The more we try to hide it, the more obvious it seems to become. Certain things in our life make us powerless. And if we had to lump all those things together in one category, it would be sin. Oh, he said the word. He shouldn't say that. That's not politically correct. But it is the case. You and I need to realize that the biggest problem that we have today is not whether or not the paycheck is going to last to the end of the week until we get another paycheck. Our biggest problem is the fact that there is this gap between us and God. And we can't do anything other than ask for help in order to close that gap. Bartimaeus knew it. He had a problem. He knew that God was right there in the person of Jesus, and he had to call out for help. And he focused on his greatest problem, not his blindness, but his sin. Bartimaeus knew the proper path to take. He knew that the eyesight was secondary. He knew that he had to have a relationship with God, and there was one thing standing in the way: the stupid things we do. Bartimaeus said, here's Jesus. I bet he can make it right. And Jesus did. Jesus didn't sit there and try to figure out, all right, what are we going to do with this guy? Are we going to make the little mud pies and put it on his eyes? Or is he going to tell me to go wash in some dirty river? Is he going to spit and smear some paste on my eyes? Is that my biggest problem? And is that the way that Jesus is going to deal with it? No. Jesus knew that there was a more permanent solution to Bartimaeus' more permanent problem. Bartimaeus had to take a leap of faith and ask for help. We have to believe that if we qualify for help, that God is going to hear our cry for help. Bartimaeus believed that he was worthy of the help, not because he was great, but because he was simply a human being in need of some assistance. He was one of God's children, a Jew who had been looking for the Son of God in the form of the Messiah. So when Jesus heard his cries, and this is another one of those amazing things in Scripture that I don't quite understand. Jesus is walking along, and there are hundreds, maybe thousands of people. And Jesus can hear one man crying out when all these other people are clamoring for his attention. Maybe to take a selfie. Maybe just to say, hey, here I am. Can you at least wave at me so I know that you saw me? And I am jealous of the selfies that were taken last night at the concert. But Jesus had a way of being able to say, hey, I can hear when someone is in need. So Jesus stopped the crowd, stopped the procession, and said, bring him over to me. Call him here. You see how Bartimaeus responded? He jumped off and he threw off his coat. He's thinking, hot diggity dog. The one person that can do something about it is taking notice of it. I am up and headed his direction. I mean, the coat was off, and he's flying towards Jesus. Remember, this is a blind man. He could have been bumping into hundreds of people on his way over there. But he knew that Jesus acknowledged him and his need. And it didn't matter what the obstacles were. Bartimaeus was not letting any of them get his way. He put himself in a position to receive help. And he risked further embarrassment in order to get closer to Jesus. Man, I wish I had the guts of Bartimaeus. I mean, this guy is gutsy. And he wasn't going to let anything stand in his way. Bartimaeus thinks to act, and he's asking is the key to receiving most anything that we need. Matter of fact, Jesus would tell his disciples, whatever you ask for in prayer, believe you have received it and it will be yours. James says the reason why we don't have it is because we don't ask for it. Asking God for what we need in prayer and asking for others what we need in person opens us up to healing and wholeness. The other interesting part of this story is when Bartimaeus gets up to Jesus, Jesus asks Bartimaeus, what do you want? Really? This is fascinating to me. It's obvious the man is blind. What do you want? Jesus asked him. Bartimaeus is ready with the answer. The way he refers to Jesus is this: my teacher. Let me see again. I don't think that see is just physical. I think it is spiritual. If he were to just say, I want my eyesight then I would say, okay, you got a point. But he referred to Jesus as a teacher, as someone who could draw him closer. I mean, that position of being a teacher in Jewish culture is someone that is going to draw you closer to God. Bartimaeus referred to Jesus as the one person that could draw him closer to God. Let me see again. What would be your answer? What would be the answer to the question? If Jesus were to say to you today, what do you want me to do for you? Can you imagine Jesus asking you that question? For some of us, that is so far beyond, we just don't think about that. Some of us, we have a grocery list every time we get to God. Some of us, just say, you're busy, God, don't worry about me. If God wants to ask you the question, God is obviously concerned about your status. He's obviously concerned about your state of well-being. How might you take a leap of faith and believe that you can receive all that you need and all that you will ever need? Jesus told Bartimaeus, go. Your screaming has made you well. No. Your persistence has made you well. No. Your faith has made you well. And faith can make us well also. We may not receive exactly what we ask, but we can be assured that Jesus is ready to meet whatever need we happen to have. Faith is the catalyst for asking, and asking is the key to healing. Be grateful. One of the keys to asking and receiving help is gratitude. When we have an attitude of gratitude, it shakes us out of our self-sufficiency and allows us to celebrate what others can do for us. In a way, giving thanks is a substance that unfreezes the wheels that drives our community. Enables us to acknowledge our dependence on God. And this is the one that we have the most trouble with. Acknowledge our dependence on each other. We sometimes think it's so much easier to be dependent upon God, but boy, I don't want to be dependent on you. Because you might let me down. I can't deal with that. And you've got other things going on in your life. But I have to. Isn't that the whole concept of the idea of a church getting together? The individual people getting together to be able to help us to work with each other, to help us grow, and to help us go deeper in our faith with God. That's what you're all about. That's what I'm about. I wouldn't be the Christian I am today if it weren't for some of you. Some of you push me, and I don't like to be pushed. But some of you push me and want to know. Tell me more. Help me understand this. And I'm like, this is not a big deal for me. But I realize if it's a big deal for you, it is a big deal for us. And I need to allow myself to acknowledge that dependence that we have on one another. You know how good it feels when you can count on somebody, when you can receive gratitude for something you've done for them, and they said, man, you got me through that tough time. Something you said, something you did behind the scenes that nobody will ever know about, but a couple of us, it makes a difference. We need to realize that. We need to realize that we're in this thing together to help each other together. So many times in our world we have gotten to the point where we have fallen and we cannot get up. And it's not a matter of reaching down on our necklace and hitting a little button. It's simply a matter of calling out for help. I'm going to call for help. God will answer. And you know what? God might answer by sending you to me. Okay? Am I willing to accept that? Am I willing to accept what God does for me through you? I don't know. I hope so. And I hope so. Because I've fallen and I need to get some help to get out. Let's pray. Gracious God,